Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Capital Regional District online event, a special information session on the Solid Waste Management Plan for the CRD. I'm Gregor Craigie from CBC Radio here in Victoria, and it's a pleasure to be here at CRD headquarters in downtown Victoria for this special COVID-friendly online event. We are going to spend the next hour taking your questions about the CRD's big solid waste management plan. A lot of interest in this from various corners of the CRD, and we are going to take your questions that you have pre-submitted and some questions that will be coming in tonight as well. Here to help me do that is Russ Smith, who is a member of the CRD's Environmental Resource Management team. He's going to start us out this evening with a brief, short overview of the draft plan, just to get our conversation started, to remind people where we're at, what the plan is as proposed. Then we'll spend most of tonight talking through some of the questions that have come in via Slido from residents in the region to discuss. We're going to cover most of those, as many as we can possibly get to tonight. We'll continue monitoring Slido throughout the next hour as well. So please click the link either in the video caption or in the comment box to submit a question or vote on one that's already been asked. You can do that as we go along here. Now, any questions we don't get to tonight will be answered in the frequently asked questions posted online after the fact at crd.bc.ca/rethinkwaste. So without further ado, then I'll introduce you once again to Russ Smith with the CRD's Environmental Resource Management team to start us off this evening. Russ.
Perfect. Thank you, Gregor. So I just wanted to take about 5 or 10 minutes at the start of this session to give a brief overview as to what's happened, where we're at, and set a bit of a stage for the questions for us to move through for the rest of the evening. So if we can just move to slide 1, I just want to talk a little bit about the solid waste management plan and what it actually is. So a solid waste management plan is a provincially required document. The plan is something that all regional districts prepare for the management of solid waste and recyclables, and it's approved by the province every 5 to 10 years. The CRD is moving into its first full revision, unfortunately, since the solid waste management plan second revision occurred 25 years ago. So we're well overdue. There's a lot of pent-up demand for conversation in the community. We want to take our community to the next level with respect to recycling and solid waste management. So as we move through the initial process, we developed goals and strategies and actions to have a conversation with our community about. We did our first consultation in early 2019 on this solid waste management plan. And from that, we developed a draft plan. And this draft plan is posted online, as you indicated, on the Rethink Waste page of the CRD website. And we are in our final round of consultation. It'll occur through mid to the end of January 2021. And we're looking for feedback from the community. We're looking for alignment with what they are expecting. And we're looking to walk through the conversation and engage the community as best we can, and obviously these relatively unusual circumstances. So if we can move to the second slide, can talk a little bit about what's come up here, which is basically called the solid waste management hierarchy. And the goal of the hierarchy is to move waste from the bottom of that triangle, the residual management, think Hartland Landfill, up through recycling, reducing, reusing, and basically try to decrease the amount our community throws out by doing other things, from not consuming at all, to reusing materials, to reducing or recycling the materials they collect. So the whole premise of all solid waste management plans in BC is looking at that hierarchy and trying to understand, based on their community needs and what's going on within their community, how they move to a more sustainable solid waste management framework using that hierarchy. So if we can move to slide 3, we can talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of where we're trying to go at a high level. The fact of the matter is back in 2019, our waste generated per capita was about 380 kilograms per person per year. That's all residential waste, commercial waste, industrial waste divided by the population of the regional district. That put us in the range of the top 2 or 3 regional districts in terms of solid waste management and doing a good job. However, there's lots more work to be done. And so we have set a target for this plan and over the next 10 years to move that number from 380 kilograms per capita to 250 kilograms per capita, basically reduce waste by 1/3, continue moving in the right direction, continue making waste more sustainable, and preserve the life of the Hartland Landfill. So if we can move to the next slide, we can talk just a little bit about how we plan on going about doing that. And this is relayed in the draft plan that is on the website so people can dig into more details. But the bottom line is, over the short term, one of our lowest hanging fruits is what we call construction and demolition debris. So buildings coming down, renovations happening, offcuts of materials during new construction. There's a lot of material that moves through the landfill that could either be diverted, that could be used for biofuels, it could be a number of different things other than being landfilled, and that's some low-hanging fruit that we need to get on sooner rather than later. So one of the first steps in our plan is to start basically building a strategy or implementing a strategy to divert construction and demolition waste, work with the commercial sector and the general public to do that. That's over the first couple of years. Midterm, we continue working on construction and demolition, but we'd also work on engaging multifamily buildings in terms of higher levels of recycling. As you're aware, Gregor, I mean, we've got single-family homes and blue boxes, and most of us have that pretty much down. I only get stickered once in a while when I put the wrong thing in the wrong bucket. But when you move to the multifamily, it's a lot more complicated in terms of storage in the parkade or basement of the building, even getting messaging out. It's one thing to talk to a household, it's another thing to talk to 30 or 100 residents. And so there's some challenges there, and we plan on hiring some interim help to help us do a better job of communicating and basically bring our uptake up within the multifamily area within the Capital Regional District. And as you know, that multifamily is growing more and more as housing affordability changes and as people transition to retirement. And so then the third pillar that we'd work on, and we continue working on construction and demolition, continue working with multifamily, is what we call industrial, commercial, and institutional waste. One of the things that happens at the CRD and throughout the province, when you see the blue box programs out, it's a really good example. It's something called extended producer responsibility. So that's when the province puts rules in place that ensure that people who are selling materials manage those materials cradle to grave. So they produce them in a responsible manner, but they actually have to take those materials back at end of life and recycle them. So electronics, large appliances are an example of that, or all the materials in your blue box. So the idea over the long term is the province is going to move towards extended producer responsibility on the commercial side as well, which should help drive down waste going to the landfill and drive up materials being recycled through the commercial, industrial, and institutional areas. So those are kind of the three pillars that hope us to move towards that 250 kilograms per capita. And then if we can move to slide 5, this at a high level just talks about all of the strategies. Again, lots of details, including actions associated with those strategies in the solid waste management plan. But again, in a nutshell, about 50% of the actions within the solid waste management plan are how to increase recycling. Be it residential, be it commercial or industrial, it's about getting more things recycled. The other 40%, or another 40%, is about reduction, how to just reduce waste in general. What not to buy, how to buy longer life products, those types of things. And then the third pillar is what we call residual management. So it focuses on Hartland Landfill, the life of Hartland Landfill, how to extend that life, how to ensure we manage the environmental risks appropriately with the landfill. So those are the three pieces, and the strategies involved are mostly on the first R's, up higher in the solid waste hierarchy, but the others are in relation to the landfill in a more minor way. And then if we move to the last slide, or I guess it's second last slide, this is a picture of Hartland Landfill. So one of the things we have been having a conversation with the community about is what we call Heartland 2100. And that's trying to understand what it looks like, not what it looks like, but communicate to the community that there is, as you can see in the map on the left-hand side of the map where it says Heartland 2100 landfill operating area, that is the build out to somewhat the boundaries of the Hartland Landfill. So this is kind of the final phase of developing the landfill, and it will happen starting potentially in 2045, maybe a little bit later, but what we want to talk to the community about are the things that have to be done to allow Heartland to be in a position to receive the waste that the community generates. We're hopeful we can convince them to generate less waste. We're hopeful maybe there's even technologies around that allow us to treat waste in a different way and use a little more innovation. But bottom line is residuals from the things we consume in our communities need a place to safely live and reside if they can't be recycled or reused. And that's what Hartland Landfill is for. So we hope 2100, if things go really well, maybe 2200 or beyond. And then the last slide, Gregor, simply is talking about greenhouse gases and climate change. As you're probably aware and residents are, the CRD made a climate emergency declaration, as did many other regional districts within British Columbia. Just for context, Hartland Landfill represents about 5% of the greenhouse gases generated in the entire region. So the decomposing matter in the landfill that is not collected by the CRD ends up causing a climate challenge. So we're looking at, A, making sure people understand what you throw out has an environmental impact, even with respect to GHGs. And then we're also looking at, we've already banned organics, we're looking at construction demolition waste, we collect the gas already and make electricity out of it. We're also looking at renewable natural gas. And we're studying the fugitive emissions at the landfill to understand how good a job we're doing. The average landfill in Canada is responsible for about 20% of the greenhouse gases in the community. We're only 5%, but we still want to work towards even doing better. So that's my not so short overview.
I thought that was pretty good. That was fairly short, actually. That was certainly within your time allotted. And as a radio person, I'm always watching time. But let's start and get into some of the questions that our viewers, the interested citizens, have submitted for tonight. I think you did a really nice job, Russ, of going through some of the ways the CRD can reduce, already does reduce going into waste going into the landfill, and then some of the lower hanging fruit. Let me start you off by asking, though, why do we need Heartland 2100? Why does the CRD need to continue landfilling in the future? That's one of the most popular questions submitted beforehand. And I think what people are asking is, why can't we get to zero waste? Why are we going to have to continue depositing and continuing to deposit material in the landfill for the decades to come? Yeah,
certainly. So good question. And it is, I mean, ultimately the goal is zero waste. But one of the mandates we have with the provincial requirements for a solid waste management plan, when we do a 10-year plan, we need to prove to the province that we have a reasonable chance of achieving that goal. And so what happens is we have the 1/3 waste reduction by 2030, which we've gone through and feel comfortable that it's a stretch goal. We have to work hard, but we should be able to get there. And we've got plans in place, dollars to spend to help us move that way. We also have put in place at the board's direction a stretch goal, which is 2/3 waste reduction. And it is something that as we annually review the results of our solid waste management plan, if we are trending in a good direction, we will ratchet down the diversion criteria and start moving closer to zero waste. The challenge will end up being, are we able to get there before the capacity of the landfill disappears? It's due to be out of space right now by 2045. And even as we move towards zero waste, if we were to get there or get close to that, there still is a need for a place where residuals go once people are done consuming and it couldn't be recycled or reused. So the challenge ends up being, we always, unfortunately, if we're going to consume, we're always going to need a place to put some of the garbage that's left over. Heartland is a regional landfill that has capacity, and what we hope is to, instead of go only to 2045, we stretch it longer to 2100, and if the community is embracing it and technology helps us out as well, maybe we make it 2200 or 2300. But one of our mandates as a regional government is to ensure there's safe and environmentally sound waste disposal infrastructure within the region. So there'll always be some form of landfill. We hope it's only landfilling a little bit, but there's a need to deal with it safely.
Tipping fees. This is a question I bet you get quite a lot. How will the CRD fund Heartland operations with tipping fees?
So there's two things that happen right now. So right now our two main revenue streams are the tipping fee. So the tipping fee we charge residents when they come in, or waste haulers who have customers when they come in. That's the majority of our money. And then we also earn revenue from recycling or diversion programs like the Blue Box program and other programs that are run by extended producer responsibility organizations. Those are our two main ones, along with we sell a little excess power to the BC grid with our landfill gas that we burn. What happens over time, though, is success in moving to zero waste means we have zero revenue. So waste diversion, and I'm not discouraging it at all, but waste diversion, we're fortunate at this point to have no tax requisitions associated with the solid waste service at all. It's all funded by the revenues that I was talking about. But as we move through moving towards zero waste, at some point the community will have to pay for the management of waste through a portion of requisitions over time. And so that ends up being the transition.
Have you got a rough idea? I mean, is that decades in the future or closer at that point?
The financial modeling we've done at this point show that it would occur somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 waste diversion. So between 250 and let's say we bring it under 200, that's when we'd be moving and need to have some sort of mechanism other than tipping fees to help fund the service.
Okay, but it's not an immediate budgetary concern that, the next couple of years.
No, it would be in the next couple of decades, but not the next couple of years.
Moving through some of the other questions, at a tour, somebody writes in, we were told that half of all things coming to the Hartland landfill could be recycled, but are improperly thrown away. You were talking about that in multi-residential, multi-family buildings, Russ. Can more effort be put into fixing this issue, making sure that everything that can be recycled is recycled?
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned at the start, about 50% of the actions that are in the draft solid waste management plan relate to improving recycling, be that at a residential level, multifamily, or even at a commercial and industrial level. So there's always lots of education to do. There's always more programs to promote the recycling of materials, to divert the materials. One of the big things that we do and will continue doing, and it's a bit of a cornerstone, is we basically have a Heartland Learning Center. So out at Heartland in pre-COVID days, classrooms would come in there, and there are kids who've gone through, and your children might have as well. It's a learning, and basically the kids then train the parents is kind of how it works. And so we continue to do that, lots of work with our education outreach people, and so that journey certainly isn't done, and the comment of 50% still is recyclable probably isn't too far off. Having said that, lots of those materials don't have programs right now, and we need to help develop those programs and get those materials diverted.
Is that probably going to be the most successful rather than more stickers, that I get on my box sometimes too?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, they're definitely, the only way you can get diversion is get a program in place that helps divert it, and then you educate and drive people towards the program. So it's a bit of both, a bit of carrot and a bit of stick.
I want to ask you about location. Of course, we're talking about the whole region plan, but a lot of attention goes on the Hartland landfill, understandably. Some people wondering, why doesn't the CRD build or modify a waste facility in the West Shore? Is it reasonable, Glenn writes, to expect a single site, Heartland, to serve the region in perpetuity, where CRD is responsible for managing waste in perpetuity? And James is writing, I'm going to just combine these two here. Since Langford is the primary area of regional expansion, why not identify long-term waste management in that area rather than trucking to the Saanich Peninsula? What would you tell people about location?
Sure. Well, it's a good question, and certainly we know population kind of moves or evolves in various areas of the district. The biggest challenge is we have a currently sited landfill. We have the infrastructure in place. To fully build it out, there is a need to clear some trees and to move some rock out of the way and place the waste. But when we look at that compared to siting a greenfield landfill or siting a landfill at a new location, the orders of magnitude of environmental impact and the amount of work that has to be done is something that really can't be justified at a regional level until we fully utilize the existing asset we have. So we're focused on the build out. There may be some opportunities to do maybe some transfer stations at some of the western communities or other areas to help more efficiently get the garbage into the region and into the center. But at this point, our focus is to efficiently build out the existing site. Not expand the site and buy more land and make the landfill bigger. This is building out the final phase as the landfill was designed, and then move and look at some of those alternatives over time.
So just so I understand you correctly, and for our viewers as well, you're saying it's cheaper economically and maybe ecologically or environmentally to expand on the current site of Heartland rather than start a new site in Langford or anywhere else in the West Shore right now?
Correct. It's cheaper for sure, and it is better ecologically. And the other challenge is siting a landfill, regardless of all those other two, is extremely challenging. And we have that bird in hand, sited, zoned, and are working towards full build out of that. Hoping it takes a very long time because we want it to last a very long time, but that's where our resource is at this point.
Does the CRD, I'm going back here, does the CRD work with provincial or federal governments for regulation to reduce non-recyclable packaging used in consumer products? You mentioned end of life and the province. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about how the CRD works with the province and federal government on those sorts of initiatives.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the CRD only plays one role in this. The municipalities play a role, and obviously the provincial and federal government does. I'll give you a little bit of an example. There's been, and you may have heard, there's been some plastics actions plans that have been going on at both the provincial and the federal level. What we do is provide feedback to the province and the feds in a form of advocacy to promote the diversion of those materials, potentially banning of certain materials. It could be single-use items, it could be a variety of things, to help promote things that are easier or better to recycle, but are things that we can't control. You may have recalled the plastic bag ban and the conversation that happened in the City of Victoria as well as Saanich and kind of went around the province. One of the challenges that the CRD has in that case is we don't have the regulatory authority. We cannot make a regional ban. We just aren't given the tools to do that. The cities can do a little bit of it, and they caused the conversation. It was nicely done by Victoria, but in the end, the province has to step in and ban those items because they're the ones that control that lever. So we work very closely, provincially, federally, and with our municipal partners to try to ensure we're each using the tools that we have to make a difference. When it comes to non-recyclable plastics and packaging, that ends up being a bigger federal issue in terms of what is allowed to even be imported into Canada or potentially into BC, but generally that's done at a national level, and we'd give feedback as a regional district to any national initiatives on that level.
Let me go back up to the top of the list, and in case Anonymous is wondering if I had some kind of plan against your question, it's the fact that I need bifocals, and I still haven't got them, but I've got my eyes straightened out here. The plan makes some mention of disposal ban enforcement tools. We're back on enforcement, the stick versus the carrot. Are fines or disposal levies, Russ, currently issued for food scraps or recyclables?
Yes, they are. So just so everyone knows, I mean, when you go to the landfill, you only get to go to the bin drop-off area. You don't get to go to the active face. And there are bylaw officers that work at the active face monitoring garbage coming out of the trucks. And when it's deemed that there are substantive levels of contamination, we're not talking a banana peel in a garbage truck. We're talking about what appears to be food waste dumped into the bin in an egregious manner. Fines are levied to motivate the behavior of not having those materials in, either by the hauler educating its customer, or sometimes the hauler will ask us to talk to their customers, but absolutely fines are levied.
Why does the plan not consider any concrete plans to reduce waste going to landfill by using waste to energy technology? What would you say about the premise of the question, and to what extent does it or does it at all?
So in the plan, there is, I think it's strategy 15, action 3, I think. Basically talks about looking at and keeping an eye on emerging technologies with respect to waste treatment. And so that specifically speaks to waste energy, integrated resource management, gasification. So what we have in the plan is that staff continue to monitor the technologies and keep an eye towards when those technologies become economic and when they are fully proven in terms of, does the technology work? Is it relatively cost effective? Does it give the environmental benefit it's looking for? So it's something we're looking at. There's a facility in Edmonton, Enerchem, that we are looking at and have had a chance to have a fair number of conversations with them. So that's something we're doing in parallel. We're keeping an eye on the technology. It's not at a stage where the board is comfortable with it yet, but we continue to review that. So it's certainly not something, we're not saying let's landfill forever and never look at new stuff at all, but we are trying to be measured. We don't want to be at the front end, the bleeding leading edge, but we definitely want to be aware of it and ensure we're keeping an eye on the technology.
And I know you can never predict the future, but is it the kind of thing where you can at least make some plans today that would enable a kind of a pivot or an adoption of new technology? You know, if you can factor in those possibilities into your current expansion plans?
So certainly I think there are some opportunities. We end up being in a bit of a confined space just by the way the landfill is, and you're building up walls of garbage all around you. However, we, for instance, are looking at opportunities for organics processing at the Hartland Landfill and the potential use of anaerobic digestion or composting. And so we've got some areas set aside for that. We have some areas set aside for rock storage. And so it's a matter of looking at those and looking at where things are closed and not closed, and there is always potential to build out. And if the technology is such that it allows us to densify the waste in a cost-effective manner, it allows us to take a long time to build out the landfill. And so there is certainly some potential to not necessarily future-proof it, but at least be thoughtful as we develop the landfill so we're not taking away options that may be available in the future as technology evolves.
A number of people are interested in biosolids. During consultation, the CRD committed that biosolids would not be applied at Heartland. This decision was reversed. How can we be confident in what is presented now?
Biosolids. So that one's not my specialty, but I'm going to give you from at least at a high level where things are at. So the beneficial use of biosolids is not part of the solid waste management plan, which is my area, but it is part of the liquid waste management plan, and so it's part of CRD's responsibilities. So the CRD's monitoring and regulatory compliance requirements are determined by what's called the Environmental Management Act. So with respect to biosolids, contaminants that may come about as a result of them, and approvals for the use of them, that is all enabled through provincial environmental legislation. And so our staff that work on the liquid waste management side of the planning and approvals will move through and get appropriate approvals for whatever is being done with biosolids, ensuring there's ministry approval beforehand. What currently is planned, what I do know without getting myself way out of my depth, is biosolids from the new residual treatment facility that's being built at Heartland will be taken for 11 out of 12 months to be beneficially used as fuel at cement kilns over in Vancouver. For the other month of the year when they're turning around the plant and doing repair and maintenance on it, they'll be doing some beneficial use of those biosolids at the Heartland site to determine, can we mitigate emissions coming off in terms of fugitive emissions off the landfill? Is there some potential for using it as growing medium for trees? That will all be done on the Heartland site, not off the Heartland site, and the environmental risks will be managed, and it will be done in compliance with provincial approvals, and there'll be transparency with those approvals and the reporting on it out to the public.
Do you know the rough timeline of that? And point taken is that you're not directly responsible, but is that going to happen on the same timeline as this current plan, or is that sort of a separate process?
So the biosolids is actually starting to happen sooner rather than later. Like, we're talking months, not years, as the sewage plant, the new sewage plant starts to function. Those solids will be moved up to the landfill and be beneficially utilized in a number of different ways, including, on occasion, the land application of that material if it can't be burned.
This one we've touched on around the edges, but here the question is bluntly from a global perspective. Hugh Stevens writes, given the CRD's declared climate emergency and the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050, how is a massive expansion of the landfill consistent with these goals?
So I take not offense, but the use of the words massive expansion I don't think are really true to what's going on. It is the final build out of the landfill design as it was always contemplated. That being said, for sure consuming, throwing out has GHG implications that we talked about earlier in the conversation. So I have no doubt that buying and throwing things out is not aligned with the climate emergency, and there certainly is a need for, despite our need to ensure we have safe disposal, there's a need for a community conversation and a broader conversation around, I'll even say consumerism, but certainly waste and waste management to ensure we're all personally accountable for what we consume, how we throw things out, what we recycle, and consider the environmental impact of all of those things.
The question of trees comes to us from Sarah. There was mention in the plan that 20 to 50 acres of trees would be planted by 2050 to make up for the loss of forested area. Where is this reforestation occurring? Will it recur? What can you tell us about reforestation efforts?
Sure. Well, maybe if we can bring up, there is a map that shows Hartland Landfill, and from above I can give a bit of an overview as to what's going on there. But basically, what I think Sarah is referring to is you'll see on the left-hand side of your screen where it says Heartland 2100 operating area, there's a strip of trees just inside that orange line. That's about 70 acres of land that eventually would be part of the full build-out of Hartland Landfill. That's what gets us towards Heartland 2100, that and the removal of rocks. There will be trees planted to offset that. I don't understand the entire carbon balancing piece. But the other thing that's happening that will happen, oh look, there's tree planting. The other thing that has happened is when the Heartland Landfill was purchased from a private company back in the mid to late 80s, I think it was mid 80s, over 600 acres of land that was surrounding the Heartland property was actually given and transferred to CRD parks. And so we are trying to create that balance. There is a need for some tree removal to just deal with the waste the community generates. There's a lot of effort going on to balance that off with acquisition of other lands and protection of other lands to ensure we help be part of the solution and certainly not a part of the problem.
Okay, so you're going to try to balance the loss of trees elsewhere in other properties that the CRD is purchasing or buying offsets in.
Absolutely, or plant. The other thing that happens at the Heartland Landfill is we do plant in areas when we close, we plant trees and grow the trees up. So in an ideal world, when Heartland is full and it is closed, the tree canopy will grow back and it will be the ability to be a multi-use park or some sort of the scar that is Heartland Landfill will move away and trees will be developed and new canopy will be put in place.
We've got a question that I bet you a lot of rural Saanich and elsewhere viewers are wondering about. What measures will be put in place to ensure the regulation of private sector curbside collection of bins are bear-proof?
One of the things that the CRD does not regulate is residential collection. So municipalities do their own collection. The province has a bit of a role there. We actually don't have the ability to regulate how waste is set out. That being said, there are a number of things that the CRD can do. Probably one of the most useful things we can do is draft what we call a model bylaw. So I get the point that the watcher is talking about in terms of certainly in rural areas, be it rural Saanich or Souk, there are bears that are there, or Machosen, and if lids aren't secure properly, you end up causing a problem in terms of animals feeding out of the garbage. So there is potential for the CRD, if there's municipal desire for that, for us to draft some model bylaws that would allow municipalities to put rules in place to regulate what their citizens have to ensure that garbage put out by their citizens does not end up being part of the problem.
Organics are 21% of the landfill. What steps does this plan have for procuring an organics processing facility within the CRD?
Sure. So organics processing, for those who don't know, organics right now are dealt with under a contract by a company called DL Bins, which has a Fisher Road Recycling, a composting facility up over the Malahat in Chemainus, and then it also potentially, depending on how much waste is there, ends up shifting some of that material even to the Lower Mainland for processing. The point being, there's not in-region organic processing. As staff, we are working through a process and hopefully are able to come late spring, early summer to the CRD board. The CRD board has approved the use of land at the Hartland Landfill for an organics processing facility. What we're in the process of is finalizing a procurement process to put out to bid potential for the processing of that material and the building of a facility. So that is something that will come to a head, certainly as a conversation at the very least during 2021.
Another question that we hear quite often, how can we make it feasible to add textiles to the recycling stream?
Yeah, that's another tough one. So one of the things that happen in textiles are a little bit like soft plastics, in that it's a hard one to put in the blue box because it cross-contaminates all the materials you're collecting. It is likely a collection at depot type of setup, and it would be another one of these programs like we were talking about called extended producer responsibility, where the province would mandate that those who sell clothes and manufacture clothes would have to manage end of life and provide opportunities to bring that material back for recycling. One of the things that does happen at Hartland Landfill is we have a number of Salvation Army bins available so people can bring and put clothes in there that allows it to be taken into some of the resellers in terms of second-hand sellers, and those that can't be used can then be used for alternate purposes. So there's a little bit going on, but the big issue, and I think the concern highlighted by the individual watching the broadcast, is the fact that there isn't a provincial program in place that allows for and mandates the funding of a program to take care of that material.
We have a question about wood waste, and I know you touched on this earlier as one of the low-hanging fruit for the first phase, construction and demolition waste, but would it be possible to divert the wood waste and any other burnables to an on-site incinerator with CO2 scrubber for power generation?
So there are a number of things that can be done with wood waste, and so part of the study work that we're going to do in terms of a strategy is understanding how far can we take it. Are we able to divert clean wood waste? Are we able to divert the waste and chip it and then sell it to a beneficial user? Or do we divert the wood waste, do we chip it, and do we use it on site? We currently have power generation on the site. We burn our landfill gas to make electricity and sell to BC Hydro. When you move through this type of beneficial use, it will be a balance of if someone's willing to buy the wood chips and it fuels their existing infrastructure versus us installing our own infrastructure. But regardless, we are interested in maximizing the value of the BTUs or the energy associated with a product like that, and that'll be part of the study work that we will do as outlined in the plan.
The CRD has one of the lowest waste disposal rates. Will this plan keep it amongst the best? The RDN and the CVRD recent SWMPs have more ambitious targets, the writer claims. So what can you say about that, about the disposal rates and how they compare?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question. As we talked about, we're shooting for 250 kilograms per capita of waste disposal, down from 380 by 2030. So a 10-year target down to 250. The Cowichan Valley Regional District is actually very similar. As a matter of fact, I think it is 250 as well. It is in that ballpark. The outlier is the Regional District of Nanaimo, which I believe is 90 kilograms per capita within the next 10 years. One of the things that we're required in the solid waste management plan is make sure that the targets we have are achievable. In other words, the province won't approve your plan unless it's achievable. We haven't seen, there's a lot of licensing and regulatory infrastructure that Nanaimo is proposing that would help them get there. We have not chosen to move in that direction. It might be a next step, but it's not where we've chosen yet. And so we hope that it keeps us in the upper echelon, and we do believe it will, along with the participation of our citizens. But there are some things that may have to be tweaked and amended along the way, especially if things like what Nanaimo is doing get passed by the province and enable them to enforce and enact things in a different way.
The next question is about a climate impact study. Why hasn't a climate impact study been done when factors as removal of forest that absorbs GHGs and more landfilling adds methane, increasing global warming?
So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, certainly the CRD is a signatory in terms of the climate emergency declaration and does take it very seriously. One of the things we are doing, although we haven't done a specific study as the question indicates, what we are in the middle of doing right now is what we call a fugitive methane emission study. So we are right now, or did last month, and we'll be doing more in a couple of months, basically taking equipment across the landfill to determine not how much emissions are coming off in a modeled how much garbage was thrown out kind of way, but actual emissions coming off by basically dragging the entire landfill and taking readings. We hope that emission study improves performance, allows us to understand what we can do with biocover, allows us to understand if there's other ways our collection infrastructure can be improved, and will allow us to focus on going from where we're at right now, which is about 5% of the region's greenhouse gas emissions for a landfill, and hopefully be able to reduce that even further. So although we aren't directly or maybe indirectly doing it, modeling our whole plan, we are directly doing it by fugitive emissions monitoring.
There's a question here about the liner. Does the Heartland state-of-the-art lined landfill have a plastic liner to collect leachate as promised when Heels Lake was drained for use as a dump? What can you tell us about the liner?
Sure. So one of the things that the CRD has mandated and takes very seriously is managing all environmental impacts associated with the landfill. So the CRD landfill it's not lined with plastic, but what they have engineered into it is what they call a grout curtain. So basically they take grout across the porous rock to seal in the leachate so it won't seep out. And what we do is basically at the bottom of the landfill, it's like a bathtub, the leachate, the dirty water, is drained and then put into leachate lagoons, and then it's pushed out into the sanitary sewer systems. So, and what we do is we monitor on an ongoing basis on a number of points, tens of points around the landfill, to ensure that none of that leachate is breaching the leachate curtain and getting out into fish-bearing streams, into agricultural areas, and so it is monitored very closely, meets provincial requirements, and that monitoring data is also available online for the public to look at.
Here's another question. Why doesn't this massive expansion of the landfill footprint, and you can address that, Russ, as well, require an environmental assessment review? It is well in excess of the 30% increase in the Act. So there's a couple of things going on there. One, we're building out the existing landfill. I wouldn't call it a massive expansion, but it is building out the landfill to its full size, and it's not small, so that's granted. One of the things we do is this plan and talking about Heartland 2100 and the full build of the landfill does not give us full environmental permission and go ahead to do whatever we want whenever we want it. There is
basically a need to get provincial approval of any expansion of the landfill within a window of when that expansion is going to occur. Heartland 2100, the landfill fills up by 2045 and we have to start filling. We will start that process and the conversation prior to 2030, but it's not actually an approval window that we're working in right now, but we definitely have on our horizon the need to get approvals. We actually don't feel we need that type of approval that's mentioned by the writer. Having said that, obviously we'll work with the province and ensure they have whatever they need or meet their requirements on a go-forward basis.
We've had so many questions here, and we're not going to be able to get through them all, but I do want to remind you that afterwards they are going to be available. Any questions that haven't been answered tonight, posted at crd.bc.ca/rethink waste. We've been talking, Russ, at a kind of a global and a regional level. I want to talk very specifically at a kind of a hyper-local level, and I don't mean that as any disrespect for people who live near the landfill, but let me try to synthesize a number of questions into one here. Why does commercial access to the landfill need to relocate to Willis Point Road? A lot of people who live near the landfill are concerned about that. The commercial access to the landfill relocating to Willis Point Road. What would you say to that question?
So there's a couple of things going on there, Gregor. One of the things that happens in the expansion of the landfill and the way the landfill was built is the north end of the site is actually the high end of the site. And as we fill in a landfill, we need to go high to low. We've built in a number of portions from the south, and now we need to turn and start building out the other direction. And there's two challenges associated with that. One is simply a safety perspective. Internal roads within the landfill, moving up high grades to dump waste, is a safety concern. Taking a road around and coming in from the high side off a highway has more appeal from a safety perspective. The other thing it does is it allows actually a smoother transition and actually takes less energy to move that waste to the place of dumping versus coming internal up super steep grades within the landfill site. So that is probably the biggest piece. One of the things we have done, and I do want to talk about, is we have indicated, and I certainly want people listening to hear this as well, the moving of commercial access to Willis Point Road will be the subject of local resident-specific info session to be held in early to mid-January. So I want people listening to hear that for sure. So residents in and around Hartland Landfill, we want to dig into that a little bit more, make sure we fully understand the concerns from all angles, and make sure we address those with appropriate mitigation to ensure that the community is heard and that we move in a direction that is a win-win for all parties.
Okay, I appreciate that. So that's good to note for Willis Point residents and residents of the area. There will be that further, more specific location consultation coming up. Let me ask you quickly, Russ, we're running out of time here, but also separate people who aren't necessarily residents asking about Durant's Lake. A lot of people fish and swim there. Dell asks, why has monitoring results following sewage spill from Heartland into Durant's Park not been made available to the public? Is impact on groundwater being monitored? That incorporates a few elements there, but what would you say about Durant's Lake, Durant's Park, and monitoring of local water?
Sure. So I'm not familiar with the specifics of the sewage spill that happened, but a sewage spill did happen as part of the infrastructure. What I was briefed on before this event was to make sure people understand that information is being processed at this point and will be made available on the website. So it's with our environmental consultants right now, and that will be, as soon as the reporting work is done, that will be made available publicly. So I'd encourage that individual or others to either email into the CRD through the website or keep an eye on our information page for that data.
Well, I want to thank all of our viewers tonight for taking part in this. It really is overwhelming. I wish you were there every morning when I was on the radio suggesting questions, because there'd never be any dead air. Unfortunately, we really don't have time, and I cannot overstate this. There have been so many excellent questions. We simply can't get to them all tonight. But all the more important then that there will be a few follow-up sessions with local residents, but also that your questions that we didn't get to tonight will be answered in the frequently asked questions posted at crd.bc.ca/rethinkwaste. So thank you again to all of our residents for tuning in and submitting questions. Russ, thank you for answering this at a very safe distance. I'm going to remind our viewers here who maybe can't quite see the layout, but we're a long way apart, aren't we, here? I don't know how many meters, but yeah, thank you for this, Russ.
No, not a problem at all. I wonder if I could just add, Gregor, the other thing with that crd.bc.ca/rethink, there's also a place there where people can not only ask questions or send information in, but they can provide their comments as well. And we are going to be correlating those comments as part of the public consultation, so encourage people to read the plan, provide feedback on the plan in many ways, not just additional questions, but straight up feedback as well.
And that's, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but that goes on the record that way, does it?
Absolutely.
So a reminder once again, crd.bc.ca/rethinkwaste. This broadcast will be reposted as well for those who weren't able to attend. So if you're struggling to say, well, he said this and then he said that, send them to the website. Note as well that the draft plan, the frequently asked questions, and additional background materials are also available for review at the CRD's website as well. So there really is a lot there. And any questions that weren't discussed, as I mentioned, will be discussed there. And as Russ mentioned, just remember this deadline, January 15th. The CRD is welcoming public input that Russ just mentioned until January 15th through the comment form that is available there at the website. And I'm going to say it one last time because you finally found the pen and they never repeat it once you do. crd.bc.ca/rethinkwaste. So thanks again for tuning in online, and thank you to Russ for answering as many questions as we could get to. And have a good night. Stay safe, everyone.